Four people, four completely different decades, four completely different financial situations, one identical mistake. A 68-year-old with a house worth $800,000 and not enough retirement savings to last 20 years. A 52-year-old who earned six figures for 2 decades and is somehow still financially stressed. A 38-year-old with a full passport, great memories, and almost nothing invested. And a 24-year-old who knows what an index fund is and spends $200 a month on things whose primary function is how they look on camera. Same trap, different costume. Every single generation. And here's the part that should genuinely bother you. None of these people are bad with money. None of them are stupid. None of them made obviously reckless decisions. They all just did exactly what their generation told them success was supposed to look like. And that, the performance of arriving, is the most expensive financial mistake in American history. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how it works, why every generation falls for it, and the one shift that separates the people who actually build wealth from the people who spend their lives looking like they did. Let me name the trap before we go through the generations, because once you can name it, you can see it. At some point in every generation's story, the world around them defined what doing well was supposed to look like. A certain kind of home, a certain kind of lifestyle, a certain kind of experience, a certain kind of aesthetic. And without anyone sitting you down and explaining it, you absorbed it. It seeped in through the people around you, the culture you grew up in, the things that got celebrated and admired and liked and shared. And when you could finally afford to live that version of doing well, you did. It felt like the natural next step. It felt responsible. It felt like progress. Behavioral economists call this signaling behavior, the tendency to spend money not primarily for the utility of what you're buying, but for what the purchase communicates to the people around you. You are not buying a house. You are buying the signal that you are the kind of person who owns a house. You are not buying the vacation. You are buying the signal that you are the kind of person who takes vacations. You are not buying the aesthetic. You are buying the signal that you have arrived. And here is the brutal math underneath all of it. Signals are expensive, and signals don't compound. Every dollar spent performing wealth is a dollar that isn't building it, and the gap between those two things over a lifetime is the difference between financial security and financial anxiety dressed up in nice clothes. Robert is 68. He bought his house in the suburbs in the early 1980s for $120,000. That house is now worth $480,000. On paper, Robert is wealthy. In practice, Robert has a problem, because almost his entire net worth is sitting inside 4 walls he lives in. His company restructured in the 1990s. The pension he expected evaporated. He has savings, but not enough to fund 25 years of retirement comfortably. Think about his net worth breakdown. 89% of it is his house. Only 11% is everything else. The financial gap between what he has and what he needs for a comfortable retirement is approximately $340,000. Not because he didn't earn enough, because for 4 decades the house was the plan. The house was the signal that he had made it. And maintaining that signal, the extensions, the renovations, the garden, the neighborhood, consumed the resources that should have been building everything else. Here's the trap Robert's generation walked into. The post-war American dream told an entire generation that homeownership was the foundation of financial security, and it was, partially. But the signal became the strategy. The house became the whole plan, and the whole plan had a $340,000 gap in it that nobody mentioned when they handed Robert the keys. The house wasn't the trap. The belief that the house was enough, that was the trap. And an entire generation built their financial lives around a signal that was real but incomplete. Karen is 52. She has earned 6 figures for the last 14 years. She has also spent 6 figures for the last 14 years. Not recklessly, not irresponsibly, just completely. Every raise produced a corresponding lifestyle upgrade. Promotion at 32, upgraded the car, hit six figures at 38, moved to a bigger house. Kids in school, added the annual overseas vacation. Each individual decision made total sense. She could afford it. She'd earned it. This is what success looks like. This is called lifestyle creep, and it is the boomer trap wearing a business casual outfit. The problem isn't that Karen spent money. The problem is that her expenses grew at exactly the same rate as her income. So despite earning more than either of her parents ever did, her savings rate barely moved. The gap between what came in and what went out stayed almost exactly the same, just at a higher number. Karen's lifestyle cost her approximately $180,000 in compounding wealth over 14 years, not in spending she regrets, in spending that felt completely reasonable and permanently consumed the margin that should have been building her future. At 52, Karen looks financially successful, and in some ways she is, but she is 10 years from retirement, and the math is tighter than it should be for someone who has been earning well for 2 decades. The arrival signal for Karen's generation was lifestyle, nice things, nice experiences, a life that looked like success, and she delivered that signal every single month on direct debit. Marcus is 38, and before I tell you his story, I need to say something clearly. The system genuinely moved against millennials in ways that were not their fault. The 2008 financial crisis wiped out the early careers of an entire generation at exactly the moment they were supposed to be building their foundation. Student debt, housing prices that outpaced income growth, a job market that took years to recover. That's real. That matters. But here's the trap Marcus's generation walked into. And it makes complete sense given everything they'd been through. When you can't afford the things that used to signal arrival, a house, a pension, real equity, you start spending on the things you can afford. And for millennials, that meant experiences, travel, restaurants, concerts, subscriptions, convenience. And the culture fully backed it. Spend on experiences, not things. You can't take money to the grave. Live your life. Every lifestyle brand, every think piece, every Instagram caption told millennials that this was actually the enlightened approach to money, that the older generations had it wrong, that experiences were the real wealth. Marcus spent his late 20s and early 30s accumulating memories, beautiful ones, genuinely. But at 38, he has approximately $23,000 invested, no property, a vague anxiety about the future that he manages by booking the next trip. The trap wasn't spending on experiences. The trap was using experiences as a substitute for building assets and having an entire cultural movement backed by brands that profited from his spending tell him that was actually wisdom. The experience economy didn't emerge because millennials discovered a deeper truth about money. It emerged because an entire generation couldn't afford the old signals, and the consumer economy immediately manufactured new ones they could. And then there's Zoe. Zoe is 24. And Zoe is genuinely interesting because Gen Z is the most financially literate generation in history. They grew up watching finance content. They know what an index fund is at 19. They talk about compound interest like it's casual conversation. So you'd think they escaped the trap entirely. Not quite. Gen Z's version is the most visible trap ever created because it lives online. The arrival signal for Gen Z isn't a house or a lifestyle or a stamp-filled passport. It's an aesthetic. The fit, the tech setup, the apartment that looks good on camera, the brands that communicate, I have taste, I have money, I have arrived, to an audience of thousands. Zoe has an investment account. She puts $50 a month in. She's proud of it, and she should be. That's a real start. But she's also spending $200 a month on things whose primary function is how they look on her feed. The trap for Gen Z isn't ignorance, it's performance. They know the right language, but sometimes use it to perform wealth rather than build it. Posting about investing while the actual numbers stay small. Talking about financial freedom while the spending habits quietly contradict it. Zoe isn't doomed. She's 24, and she's already ahead of where Marcus was at 24. But the trap is there, set and waiting, wearing a ring light and a carefully chosen background. Here's the insight that most personal finance content will never say out loud. The trap is not accidental. Every generation's arrival signal was manufactured by industries that profit when you perform success. The post-war real estate industry needed buyers, so they sold the American dream with a mortgage attached. The luxury goods industry needed customers, so they sold the idea that your car and your clothes communicate your worth. The experience economy needed spending, so they sold the idea that travel and restaurants were actually the enlightened alternative to materialism. The aesthetic economy needed engagement, so they sold the idea that your setup and your brands communicate your taste and your status. In every case, the arrival signal was designed by someone who profits when you buy it, and in every